All right, team. Speaking of Nicola Willis, speaking of the ferries, we saw Anne Genter in the house this week having a bit of a crack, a bit of a chat at old Nicola Willis about this stuff and about spending money on roads but not ferries. So we just thought, why don't we get Anne to come and join us and have a chat about it? So welcome to the show, Anne Genter.
Kia ora.
Kia ora. How are you?
Good. It's great to be back. Great to see you. Thank you.
Yeah, been a while. Did you ever sleep this afternoon? No? Yes?
Did not. No.
No. I did. Because I'm very, very old. Hey, I saw something on Mountain Tui's. Oh, see, we gave credit again, Chewy. Mountain Tui's YouTube channel this week. I'm going to play a couple of short clips of you in the house and the response from Nicola Willis to you in the house, and then we want to have a chat about it. Here is you in the house talking to Nicola Willis, asking Nicola Willis about spending money on roads, but not on ferries. Let's get this bit first of all.
Why has she considered that $3 billion for this IREX project, which had a business case and clear strategic value of retaining a rail connection between the North and South Island, was unaffordable, but yesterday has committed to at least $3 billion to add less than 2 kilometers of one car lane in each direction in central Wellington before an
I like that look. I like the look, which is actually, I can't believe I'm saying this out loud, what you're actually thinking.
One car lane in each direction in central Wellington before an investment case has even begun.
Okay. And so then Mountain Tui went on to point out the response. I see we've lost Chewy. I'm sure he'll be back when his computer rights itself. And then the response. So you've basically asked, how can you justify spending, what was it, $3 billion, whatever it is, on a road?
It's going to be at least $3 billion, not just on the road, because, $3 billion will buy you a decent amount of road out in the rural areas where it's needed.
Yeah.
But in central Wellington and tunnels, it's not very much road.
So why would you spend $3 billion on that with no business plan, but cancel $3 billion on the roads of national significance known as the Cook Strait? And I do want to talk about this as well, which is the response, which is the worst non-response to a point that she's actually goading in her non-response as well. So let's hear what she had to say to respond to that. Fair question.
Well, Mr. Speaker, if the member for Rongotai wishes to tell the people of Miramar that they don't deserve a duplicate Mount Vic tunnel, that they should sit in traffic, that their buses should go slowly, that they should have an adequate ability to cycle through the tunnel to get to work, then she is welcome to go and campaign on her commitment to get rid of the second tunnel. Good luck.
So, an absolute non-answer there as well. So first things first. The national response to your question of roads over ferries. We've been talking a lot about the ferries here. We're not going to drop it either, as people have just seen. We've got a whole merch line come out dedicated to it. Tell us where we're at as a country right now and where you guys are at as the opposition trying to figure out what these guys are actually doing.
Well, I just think it's hard to explain to ordinary people who expect the government to make reasonable decisions based on evidence about what's good for the country. And unfortunately, the current lot are not doing that. And I just think a lot of people seem surprised by this. They think, well, national, they've been in government before. Yeah, of course, they prioritize slightly different things, but they're not reckless and irresponsible. But they are. The decision to cancel the ferry order was reckless and irresponsible because there was no alternative plan in place. And the order, this was a project that had been looked at for, 5-6 years. It was well down the track. Yes, it needed some more money, but so is every project over the last little while. Like there's highway projects that have blown out to, by at least as much as the portside infrastructure, if not more. And those are still going ahead. So, and then of course they've just announced this other project, which there's no investment case for it, but they're saying they're going to do two tunnels in Wellington that are going to have a bottleneck with 7 traffic lights in between them. So it's just, it doesn't stack up. It doesn't make sense. But this is a government, and you can see it with Nicola Willis and you see it with Samir Brown. They're not going to do 2 tunnels in Wellington. They're going to have a bottleneck with 7 traffic lights in between them. So it's just, it doesn't make sense. But this is a government, and you can see it with Nicola Willis and you see it with Samir Brown. they're just so committed to their like very shallow talking points that they campaigned on, I guess. And they campaigned on, I don't know if they campaigned on canceling the ferries, to be fair, but they did campaign on some sort of tunnel in Wellington.
Yeah. Just so we're aware, they did not. So when they come out and talk about, Winston Peters came out this week, Chewy, or last week, and saying what we've finally done is stop the last guys who were doing things they didn't have permission to and didn't have a mandate for, after they've done things like cancelling the ferries and downgrading Dunedin's hospital as well. The infrastructure question overall. I mean, I think that this government, to their credit, I mean, we give credit when credit's due, they went populist at the last election, and that's what helped them get through. This tunnel thing in Wellington sounds like a populist idea. When do the voters kind of go, well, actually, I can even see through your populism now. I can see that actually ferries would be a better idea than a tunnel. Have they bitten off more than they can chew in their populist idea with these tunnels, or is this going to keep working, do you think, to fool the public?
It's a fair question. I mean, I don't know, but I can say that at least in Wellington Central and Rongotai, the government parties did very poorly. I mean, I think, the Greens got the #1 party vote in Wellington. We were the top for party vote in Wellington Central and Rongotai. We won the seats. And if you add in Labour's vote, which was relatively close behind us in Rongotai, reasonably close in Wellington Central, it was like 70% of the people voted Labour or Green, and then you add into Party Maori and Top, and it's only about 26% that voted for government parties. So, and that's with party vote. So I think the commitment to the tunnel in Wellington has something to do with the base of, and possibly New Zealand Transport Agency. I'm not sure. It's Chris Bishop and Nicola Willis and the people they listen to, I guess. But it's not really the people of Wellington. Maybe the people in the north of Wellington, who want to be able to just drive through Wellington to get to the airport. But yeah, I'm not convinced that roads are populist. I think that rail is very popular in New Zealand. And if National was serious and campaigned on rail and invested in it, and the ferries, I think that it would be electorally successful for them. So I don't totally understand where they're coming from on this, other than some weird ideology. But again, I think it's like they genuinely must think that these projects are good. And I think they're surprised when they find out that they don't actually stack up. They're not the best use of money.
Speaking of infrastructure, when we see and have headlines about Labour and National working together on PPPs when it comes to infrastructure, should we as the public be celebrating that as a government and opposition coming together and getting stuff done? Or should we be more concerned that they're talking PPPs and it's going to be paid for twice, once by the taxpayer and then again by the taxpayer with tolls?
Yeah, I wouldn't be so rosy tinted glasses as Labour is about the public-private partnerships, because I mean we've seen they've actually cost more money when it comes to Transmission Gully, Puhui to Warkworth, and I can't. Now we're in a more high interest rate environment. Going to the private sector for finance is going to make things even more expensive. You still have to pay the money back. I'm not convinced that Christopher Luxon understands that, it's not just free money. Like, the private sector doesn't just come build you a bunch of infrastructure for free from overseas. We'll have to pay for it again. And of course, again, they're prioritizing projects that don't fundamentally reduce transport costs or improve efficiency. So it's not like there's some things that make sense to borrow money to invest in them. But for these roads, it doesn't make sense. And then on top of it, we'll be paying extra. And then if they want to have user charges, I think the thing is the tolls won't pay for the roads. Even if they tried to toll them to pay for them, nobody would use them. So they'll say they're going to fund it via tolls, and then, as they usually do, they'll at the last minute be like, "Oh, never mind. We're not going to toll it. This is just coming out of the general fund for hospitals and schools and public services."
Chewy, you spent a fair bit of time in Wellington. You must have some thoughts around this whole thing.
Yeah, look, for a big chunk of the time that I lived in Wellington, there was obviously a lot of discussion and public feedback sought and that sort of thing as part of the Let's Get Wellington Moving project. And there were some really exciting ideas in there with light rail from, I think at one point was considered from Johnsonville right out to Island Bay or out to the airport, converting one of the tunnels into cycling and a walking tunnel, and then having multiple lanes going through one tunnel with 2 lanes dedicated to public transport, whether that be buses or trains. And then it all just fizzled. It seemed to me that more than a decade's work got fluffed. And then everyone went, oh, okay, blank slate. Big tunnel, 2 big tunnels.
Tunnels that are not connected and have a bunch of traffic lights and crowded city streets in between.
Absolutely. And anyone that has any experience in central Wellington will tell you that the problem is the Basin Reserve.
Yeah.
Because you'll come out of those tunnels and then smack into what is basically a great big roundabout surrounded by traffic lights, where all of central Wellington's traffic coming in from Island Bay, coming out from Miramar, coming the other way, they all go through this big bottleneck. And that seems to be the problem that nobody
I think
wants to solve.
they are proposing to grade separate the basin, but you still have to go on Vivian Street and Cambridge Terrace if you're heading to the airport. Maybe on the way back from the airport, it will be a bit faster, but because they've done the bypass there. But there's the southbound side is not really going to be improved by much. I was just thinking, like, I don't know if you're interested in this, but like one problem I think is the institution. So like NZTA, they just have some people who've been really focused on this idea of 4 lanes, which is really just 2 lanes in each direction, to the airport because of a 20th century approach to categorizing roads that says, oh, well, you got to have a state highway going to an airport. But the funny thing about that is, I mean, there's virtually no heavy freight being moved between the eastern suburbs and central Wellington. All the freight, the actual state highway 1 is the Cook Strait ferries. You know what I mean? And that's the rail connection as well. And the people getting on the plane can't take their car with them. So, this idea that you have to drive to the airport is kind of silly. It's good for the airport because they make a lot of money off parking and taxi stands. But in most cities in the world, they've figured out that mass rapid transit, is the way to move lots of people in and out of an airport, because an airport is kind of like public transport. It's scheduled services with large numbers of people in the same vehicles. So there's a real, opportunity to solve the problem of traffic congestion in Wellington, which only is ephemeral, to be honest. Like, I mean, it's only less than an hour, I would say, at the peak, twice a day, if that. There's an opportunity to solve our real transport challenges, but you've got to prioritize the money into other things. And I think particularly when they've canceled such an important project with the ferries, and which might have flow-on effects. And I'm sure you have talked about this on your show before, like canceling rail-enabled ferries may sort of end rail freight in the South Island, which is a shocker. And that, I don't believe they've considered that at all. I don't think the advice they received from Treasury officials or Ministry of Transport went into any practical implications of severing this connection. And I think they massively underestimated the impact it will have on freight costs to get stuff to the South Island from the North Island.
I think that probably Nicola Willis and Christopher Luxon probably think of the South Island. They watched like Lord of the Rings and they saw all that stuff in Central Otago and they thought it was a mythical land, and now they believe that for real. So why would you need to send rail to a mythical land that doesn't really exist? Surely New Zealand is the North Island, and they don't really understand why it's called the North Island when there's nothing else, but that's all that's in their mind. That's possibly what they're going through. Sorry, Chewy, I interrupted you.
I was just going to say, I'm personally not a fan of any situation that relies on Winston Peters to be a linchpin. And that's what it is. Part of part of his regional development fund with Shane Jones when he was on the other side, reinvigorated the hillside rail works down here in Dunedin. In which case, they're doing the work, and now they're talking of severing this rail link between the two islands. So how do you get the things that they're working on at Hillside to the North Island now?
So again, I think it's a combination. Like there's a little bit of like politics or whatever, but I actually think that both within Treasury and within NZTA, there's like a culture that is anti-rail and that is pro-highway and doesn't, and is just into building the highways wherever, even when they don't make sense. And that she received some advice from Treasury that was like skeptical of KiwiRail's case for these ferries, and then just, I'm going to be tough and I'm not going to give KiwiRail more money. And I don't know the extent to which they really understand the consequences of these decisions. And I don't think they're popular. Like, I think losing rail would be like quite catastrophic for New Zealand, especially in the 21st century when we have to massively reduce our carbon emissions from transport. But even just the cost, like the cost of moving things by truck is greater. If you don't have an alternative, if you don't have coastal shipping, if you don't have a viable rail service, then there's no option and people have to move stuff by truck. And it's not just, it's the cost for the people moving the goods and it's the cost for the roads, which are constantly having to be rebuilt. And then there's the carbon emissions and the environmental costs. But
I think when you've got the CEO of Main Freight going, this is a bad idea.
Well, he's smart. Okay. He's really smart.
That's a big problem.
He actually is really smart, and Main Freight are not involved in that Transporting New Zealand, which used to be called the Road Transport Forum, because they're smart. Like, they care about logistics. They run a successful business globally, and they've seen how stuff works overseas, and they know that just throwing a few more highway lanes into Auckland or Wellington isn't going to solve the problem. So I think we should be listening to the CEO of Main Freight.
And in your opinion, do you think this government understands how interconnected things are?
I honestly think that a lot of these politicians, sorry to say, my colleagues, who I wish, were genuinely curious and interested in solving problems, I think they come with like a certain ideological point of view. Clearly, there's a lot of people in government who are, here to serve the interests of their donors. And then there's some who are just have certain ideological positions, like tax for rich people is bad. Benefits for people who've lost their jobs, bad. Cars good, motorways good, rail bad, public rail company bad. Let's make it private. I think it's like, and they haven't really like thought through, because they also say we care about cost benefit analysis and cost effectiveness, but clearly they haven't done the math on their own policies. So
we haven't actually touched on this in this conversation. We started talking about ferries, but can we get a sense from you being in the House where we're at with ferries at all? Because where the public is we saw this ferry order cancelled. We all went, yeah, that's a lot of money, but it appears that since the cost of construction has gone up, it's still probably quite a good deal, and most of it's on the ports as well. There's a big chunk of it that's on the ports, so it kind of looks like a bad decision. So what are we going to do? And tying that into Nicola Willis's very favourite saying of a reliable second-hand Corolla versus a Ferrari, I'll be pretty prepared to bet almost any amount that they are going to spend more than $3 billion, including the cancellation fees that some people are saying are towards $1 billion. Including those, they're going to spend more than $3 billion and get us a lesser product than we would have had, which means we are actually literally doing the opposite of what she said, which is getting a second-hand Corolla and paying a Ferrari price for it. Where are we at? Where are we at, Julianne?
It's secret. They won't tell us anything. And I've asked a lot of questions, and I've OIA'd, and they're just saying, no, you're not going to, you'll know when the decisions have been made. But I think, I do think that the ferry break fees, like the break fees for the contract, would probably be almost as much as just buying the 2 ferries. No work had been done on alternatives. I think originally they were trying to go to a Chinese ferry company.
Of course they were. Party of business, Joey, party of business who are going to cancel a contract that would have got us the fucking ferries. It's a party of business though, you know? Businessman, party of business. Sorry, Julianne, it's just infuriating.
No, it is infuriating. It's awful. But I think that it's possible that they're going, I don't know. I wouldn't bet against them going back and trying to negotiate a deal with Hyundai, with the South Korean shipbuilders, but whether or not they'll be rail enabled, or they'll have to change something, right? They'll have to change something about it. But I think after they canceled it, they realized they can't really solve this problem for a lot less money. They're not saving money, and it's going to cost the same or more for a worse outcome. Definitely, Pat. Sorry, I just combined your last name and your first name.
Thanks.
I think the fact that they're keeping this all secret, right, because it's commercially sensitive, ruddy. Just, it really comes off of like, we know the answer and the answer is bad. And we do not want you to know the answer. Yeah. And this whole thing is just so knee-jerk. Like they could have spun it in a way that they look like the hero. They could have gone, like the deal that Labour did was bad. We've been in negotiations with Hyundai and we've saved $5,500. Look, we've got a better deal instantly. We're so good at this. But instead, they've cancelled it. And they've just pulled the pin on a grenade that they just don't know when it's going to go off.
Yeah.
And we're just sitting here talking about it every couple of weeks going, but the shoe's going to drop. At some point, they're going to have to announce that they've done something. We'll do the sums. We'll look at the boats. We'll look at the fact that they have to still rebuild the ports to handle the new boats and be more resilient. That's the problem that was being solved. They still have to solve it. And whatever they're going to come out, everybody says that the IREX project was a good deal. Business case was solid. Everybody agreed that it was the right way to go, apart from Nicola Willis that came into their office and then threw it in the bin instantly. It is going to be devastating to them.
Chewie, you forgot you forgot to give her correct credentials. English graduate, Nicola Willis. You forgot that part about it. Who's running our finances? Sorry,
maritime expert, ocean going captain, Nicola Willis.
Look, there's a couple of questions I've got left, a bit kind of skewed from that, Julianne. But is there anything else you want to mention about the ferries? Do you want to bring us down any more? Go on, make our nice worse, Julianne.
Look, no, I mean, I think that they probably will. I'm hoping that they will. And sorry to rely on Winston Peters for this, but I am hoping that they will make a decision to carry on with the original contract somehow. Maybe try to make a different plan for the port side infrastructure that saves them some money. I mean, admittedly, Greater Wellington, I believe, pushed Kiwi Rail to go up to Kaifara, which is further away, and possibly a more expensive place to do the wharves up there. So maybe there was something that could have been done to find a slightly better solution on the Wellington side. But all that work that's just been stopped and picked in, I mean, you're going to start it up. It's not going to be cheaper, right? And it still needs to be done. So I think they wanted probably a private solution, like some sort of private company to come in and be like, we'll run the ferries, and, Kiwi Rail shouldn't be in the business of running boats. This is ridiculous. But I think they have created a huge mess for themselves. So that's good, right? It means hopefully people will realize that these people are not great economic managers.
But it's that strange. it's that strange thing, Julianne. I mean, those of us who aren't particularly impressed with this government go, oh, that's good, but, I'm going to be on the ferries at Christmas time or in January next year coming to the North Island doing a road trip. And all I'm going to be thinking is, at a year from then, there could have been a new ferry. And even though it's kind of showing them their whole ass, it's still screwed New Zealand en masse for the next, 20, 30, 40 years. So whilst it's good that we get to see how terrible these guys are, it's one of those things that I wish they hadn't been terrible in this instance, because it's going to be so bad for the country.
No, 100%. I'd much rather they had made a better decision, and I hope something can be salvaged. I mean, we've lost a year, but, at least a year.
Yeah. Here's two quick questions for you. I know there's a dress code in Parliament, but what would we have to get this printed on to send to you to wear in Parliament?
I would definitely get kicked out of the house if I wore that into Parliament, unfortunately.
But think of the headline.
I would consider my options were, it's interesting because the speaker hasn't kicked anyone out yet. And I think it's possible he wants to keep it that way. But yeah, I would happily, I love it. It's great. And yeah, I'll talk to my team here about whether we could get away with it. I don't think I could. I definitely
we'll do the greens a bulk deal. You just let us know. And the last thing is, I know I've already shown this, but Chewy was playing with his camera at that point, and for people who have just joined us, I want to ask for you, how is a minister allowed to answer the question, which is basically, you gave away the ferries, you're spending $3 billion on roads. How can you justify that and get this as the answer?
Mr. Speaker, if the member for Rongotai wishes to tell the people of Miramar that they don't deserve a duplicate Mount Vic tunnel, that they should sit in traffic, that their buses should go slowly, that they should have an adequate ability to cycle through the tunnel to get to work, then she is welcome to go and campaign on her commitment to get rid of the second tunnel. Good luck.
So how is that? I mean, I guess I'll say from any politician. I mean, I guess both sides do it, but the government are the ones that are held to account at the moment. So they're the ones that need to provide answers to these questions. Why is that allowed? And why is that allowed? How do you get around that?
It's been really frustrating to ask questions this time, and I have to say that I'll just be totally honest. I really disagree with the speaker's approach. So the speaker afterwards claimed that my question was out of order. It's not out of order. My question was not out of order. I'm sure it wasn't. But he claimed that my question was out of order. So he just, they do everything they can to shut us down and to the ministers are not held to account. They're not expected to really address questions. They get away with all kinds of rubbish like that. And then I get told off by the speaker, like my question was out of order. And it is kind of like slightly working, because it's very discouraging, in that environment. You kind of feel like, oh, well, should I not, what do I do now? How do I get around this? Same with written questions. I've really struggled to get reasonable answers to reasonable questions from Simeon Brown, especially. And I need to make a complaint to the speaker, but I don't really have a lot of faith he's gonna act that way, because he's from the National Party, and he hasn't demonstrated an ability to be objective, in my opinion.
Does he feel more partisan than previous speakers? Because I mean, I'm not in the House, obviously. You are, and you see what's going on. Trevor Mallard was speaker, wasn't he? Trevor Mallard. Did they feel more even-handed, previous speakers? Because anytime we see Jerry, it's always a highlights package, and he does seem to be very sort of pro the national / more conservative right position. How do you feel about that? Does he feel a bit more partisan than other speakers?
Yeah, I definitely think that Trevor Mallard went much harder on the government ministers and we gave answers when I was a minister. Like, we actually answered the questions, especially written questions. They'll just give me a link to some documents and say, find it yourself. Like, they don't even attempt to answer the question. That information might not be in those links. It's really, really, it's definitely way worse. I haven't complained to the speaker about the written questions, but anytime I've done a point of order this time, he's been really hard on me and claimed that I was the problem. When I first started in Parliament, Jerry Brownlee was the transport minister, and I got to ask him a lot of questions. And Lockwood Smith was the speaker initially, and I definitely felt like it was a fair situation. David Carter, maybe a little bit less objective, but still way better than what I think happened in this exchange, where I was told my question was out of order. And then just one other thing I was going to say, sorry, this might be boring, but, that claim she made about the Mount Vic Tunnel, that it's going to speed up buses and it's going to have walking and cycling, that's not even true. The buses go through a different tunnel. The buses go through a bus tunnel, and the buses aren't slowed down, but they're not affected by this. And as far as I know, I'm pretty sure that walking and cycling tunnel is not going to be included in the government's option for these tunnels. So, I mean, they haven't put out enough detail for us to assess that. And I was just thinking I should ask a written question about that as I was watching that exchange just now with you. But I'm pretty sure that walking and cycling won't be included because it will be considered too high cost in projects that are already very high cost. And they're trying to get the cost of those projects down any way they can. Obviously, the walking and cycling component would be small relative to the car component, but yeah.
Well, listen, Julianne,
I caught that comment on the bus tunnel as well, and the first thing that I thought of was like, you've never taken the bus to the airport. You would know that straight away. It takes a different route from the mainstream traffic, and it doesn't really get caught up in traffic too much because of it.
Yeah,
it's funny that they don't take the bus.
Julianne, if they're going to keep avoiding, then we need to keep pointing it out. So don't be a stranger. You got my number. If anything ever happens, get a hold of us. Come say good day. We'll point it out. And there'll at least be some of it out there into the ether that some people can possibly pick up on to think about over the next, let's say 2 years. Shall we? Very good.
Really appreciate your work.
All right, Julianne, all the best. And we'll talk to you super soon. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Pomare.